Welcome. Tonight we're not exploring beautiful landscapes or charming towns. Instead, we're delving into the lives of history's most infamous dictators. These men seized absolute power, reshaped nations, and left devastation that still haunts us. Our aim isn't to sensationalize, but to understand. How did ordinary men become tyrants? What patterns allowed them to rise? Recognizing these warning signs is crucial. They're not just relics of the past, but alarm bells for today. We'll examine the machinery of tyranny, from purges to propaganda, and the men whose names are synonymous with terror. This is more than a history lesson, it's a global cautionary tale. Let's begin. Adolf Hitler, his name is synonymous with evil. Once a failed artist, he rose in a broken Germany, promising greatness and scapegoating minorities. His Nazi party, once fringe, became a force by exploiting fear and resentment. In 1933, he was handed power. Democracy vanished overnight, opponents were crushed, the press silenced, and propaganda ruled. The Nuremberg Laws began the systematic persecution of Jews, escalating to the Holocaust, the industrialized murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others. Hitler's ambitions led to World War II, a conflict that killed over 70 million. His ideology wasn't just about conquest, but annihilation. In the end, Hitler died in a bunker, leaving a continent in ruins and a moral scar on humanity. His legacy, a permanent warning of where unchecked hate and power can lead. Never forget. Joseph Stalin's tyranny was cold and methodical. After Lenin's death, Stalin outmaneuvered rivals and seized total control of the Soviet Union. His forced collectivization caused famine, especially in Ukraine, killing millions. The Great Terror followed. Paranoia, show trials and purges sent millions to the gulag, death by labor and starvation. Stalin's regime perfected the totalitarian state, where fear ruled and the individual was nothing. During World War II, the USSR suffered immense losses but emerged a superpower, masking Stalin's brutality. By his death in 1953, he'd built an empire on terror and corpses. Estimates of his victims range from 20 to 30 million. Stalin's legacy, a society where the state's will was absolute, and dissent meant death. He was not just a dictator, but the architect of a world built on fear. The lesson: beware the quiet bureaucrat with absolute power. Mao Zedong ruled over more people and caused more deaths than any dictator in history. After leading the communist victory in China, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward, forced collectivization and backyard steel furnaces. The result was disaster. Famine killed between 15 and 55 million. Mao's grip weakened, but he returned with the Cultural Revolution, unleashing the Red Guards to destroy old culture and persecute millions. Intellectuals, teachers, and even parents became targets. Chaos and violence reigned, ancient heritage was smashed, and society was torn apart. Mao died in 1976, still revered by many, but his rule left tens of millions dead and a culture in ruins. He unified China, but at an unimaginable human cost. His legacy is a paradox: national hero and mass murderer. The cult of personality he built still casts a long shadow. History must remember both sides. Benito Mussolini, the father of fascism, rose from journalist to dictator in post-World War I Italy. Promising a return to Roman glory, he used his Blackshirts to intimidate and crush opposition. In 1922, the March on Rome handed him power. No coup, just political surrender. Mussolini outlawed rivals, controlled the press, and built a ridiculous cult of personality. His economic miracles were mostly propaganda, his foreign policy disastrous. Invading Ethiopia and allying with Hitler dragged Italy into World War II, exposing the regime's weakness. As Italy fell, Mussolini was deposed, captured, and executed by partisans. His body was displayed in Milan, a brutal end for the man who invented fascism. Mussolini's legacy: style over substance, and a warning about the dangers of empty bravado. Fascism's roots began here. Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge turned Cambodia into a nightmare. In 1975, they seized Phnom Penh and declared Year Zero. Society would be remade from scratch. Cities were emptied, millions forced into rural labor camps. Money, religion, and family were abolished. Intellect was a death sentence. The regime targeted anyone educated: doctors, teachers, even those with glasses. Starvation, disease, and execution became daily realities. The killing fields, mass graves, became infamous worldwide. Tuol Sleng Prison processed thousands for torture and death, only a handful survived. In 4 years, up to 2 million died, nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population. Vietnam's invasion ended the genocide, but Pol Pot never faced justice. Cambodia still bears the scars of his radical, murderous vision. The killing fields are a permanent reminder of ideology gone mad. Kim Il-sung founded North Korea, the world's most isolated dictatorship. Installed by the Soviets, he purged rivals and built a regime based on Duce, total self-reliance and absolute obedience. A cult of personality elevated him to godlike status. His image and myths permeate every aspect of life. The state controls all information and society is divided by loyalty. Disloyalty means prison camps for entire families. The regime's brutality is matched only by its secrecy. Kim Il-sung created the first communist dynasty, passing power to his son and grandson. Today, North Korea remains a prison state, its people trapped by fear and propaganda. Nuclear weapons are prioritized over basic needs. Kim's legacy, a nation frozen in terror, outliving its founder. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq through fear and violence. Rising in the Ba'ath Party, he seized power in 1979 with a televised purge. Saddam's rule was defined by war. The disastrous Iran-Iraq conflict killed over 1 million, and he used chemical weapons on Iranians and his own Kurdish citizens. The Anfal campaign was genocide, villages destroyed, thousands killed. In 1990, he invaded Kuwait, triggering the Gulf War and years of crippling sanctions. The 2003 US-led invasion toppled him. Saddam was captured, tried, and executed for crimes against humanity. He never showed remorse. His legacy, a nation shattered by decades of brutality and war. Saddam's reign is a warning of the devastation wrought by unchecked power. Francisco Franco's dictatorship in Spain was defined by its longevity and repression. After a brutal civil war, Franco's nationalists crushed the republic, beginning decades of authoritarian rule. The White Terror saw mass executions and imprisonments, democracy and dissent were erased. Franco kept Spain neutral in Huatu, surviving by aligning with anti-communist powers. Economic reforms in the 1960s brought growth, but political freedoms remained suppressed. Franco ruled until 1975, grooming a successor to continue his regime. Instead, King Juan Carlos transitioned Spain to democracy. Franco's legacy stability at the cost of freedom, and a nation still wrestling with its past. His shadow lingers over modern Spain. Idi Amin's rule in Uganda was a surreal blend of brutality and absurdity. Seizing power in 1971, he expelled the Asian community, crippling the economy. His killer squads murdered up to 500,000 intellectuals, rivals, and innocents. Amin's bizarre antics, self-bestowed titles, outlandish claims, masked a reign of terror. Internationally, he supported hijackers and antagonized world leaders. Defeat by Tanzania ended his rule. He fled to exile, never facing justice. Amin's legacy, a nation traumatized by violence and chaos. His rule was driven by paranoia and ego, not ideology. A caricature of a dictator, but his horrors were all too real. Augusto Pinochet's 1973 coup ended Chilean democracy, ushering in 17 years of dictatorship. The regime unleashed mass arrests, torture and executions. Thousands disappeared. Pinochet's Chicago Boys imposed radical free market reforms. Economic growth came with soaring inequality and poverty. Political opposition was crushed. Fear enforced the new order. In 1988, a plebiscite forced Pinochet to step down, but he secured immunity and remained army chief. Arrested in London in 1998, he was never convicted, dying in 2006. Pinochet's legacy divides Chile economic progress versus human rights abuses. He claimed to save Chile, but at a terrible cost. His story is a warning about sacrificing freedom for order. Democracy is fragile. 10 men, 10 nations, and a death toll beyond comprehension. Their methods differed, but all exploited fear and division to seize power. These stories are not distant. They're warnings about the fragility of democracy and the dangers of unchecked authority. The capacity for evil lies within humanity, not monsters. We honor the victims by learning from history, recognizing the signs, and defending our freedoms. The past echoes in our present. Vigilance is our duty. Thank you for watching.